Hello again, and welcome to Gate English Training School's IELTS course. And the current course we're doing is on writing. Now, today we are looking at task one still. This will be the last lesson we look at task one, and we're covering all of the other kinds of charts and graphs that we haven't already covered so far. Maps, diagrams, flowcharts, and sometimes you'll see a combination of two different things. And I'll talk a little bit about what you do when you encounter that kind of question. For those of you who haven't seen the previous three videos, my name is Gavin. So welcome, let us get started. So first of all, maps. Now, maps can be a little bit daunting to people when they first see them. You look at them and going, oh, that's not what I've practiced. How do I report main features here? But it's actually pretty easy. In fact, I think maps are one of the easiest things to report. So first of all, you'll see a few different options. One map, two maps, three maps. I don't think I've ever seen one that has four different maps. Normally, the ones that have two or three will have different time periods. Sometimes when you see one map, it might have like dotted lines saying this is where we are planning to build something. So it will show what buildings are there now and what buildings are being built in the future. So essentially it's two maps, but they've put them on top of each other. So first of all, the most difficult challenge for people is to report the main features. Now, as most people have been watching these videos know, the main features are very important. Every task one IELTS question asks you to report the main features. So what you really need to think about is, what can we take away from the information in these maps? Now, this one here is obvious, and sometimes the main feature is very obvious. Now, please don't complain that you can't see these words. That's not important. This is the name of the village. It's Meadowside Village. This is Fontaine. It's a town near Meadowside Village. But the question asks you to report about, says the map is about how Meadowside Village has changed. So first of all, if you're looking at this without knowing these words, the very first thing that should stand out to you, and it should be very clear, is that it has gotten much bigger over this time and has actually become part of Fontaine. Okay, that's fairly clear. Most people get that it has gotten bigger. If you don't report that, you're really not going to get a very good score for your task achievement, the TA score. After that, you could probably see some certain changes. We need to think, what are the main kind of things that have changed? So we can see that there are some other buildings that have been added, some large buildings. I believe this is a superstore, a housing estate, and a leisure complex. Then we have a hotel, a station, and a business park. Don't worry, it doesn't matter what the buildings are. The main thing is that you can see they've added some special buildings to this town. You would also say the other main changes is that they have developed the transport. You can see they've made this road here has become bigger. This road has been added. And if you don't know, and you really should know that on any map, this is a train line. When you see this on any map in the world, that's pretty much the standard thing for train lines. So we can see here they have added a train line. So that's what you would be doing for this one. You would be saying, oh, this village has changed by growing larger and also developing its facilities and transport. That would be your main feature paragraph, saying something like that. In terms of the structure for the other paragraphs, in this situation, I would suggest 3 BPs. Again, 3 body paragraphs. So you have your introduction and then BP1, the main features. Then I would have a BP2 and a BP3. And I would probably do it in one way. I would talk about the changes in the buildings, And then I would talk about the changes in the transport. BP2, buildings. BP3, transport. You could also divide it by time. So your BP2, you could talk about the changes from 1962 to 1985. And your BP3 could talk about the changes from 1985 until now. Both of those would be perfectly okay. I prefer the idea of buildings and transport because I feel like it's the same topic. Also, within that paragraph, I would just have two sentences. I would say which buildings have been added between here and here. The second sentence, what has been added between here and here. Same thing for the paragraph on transport. So it's actually really easy to describe this map. Now, different maps, however, are not always obvious. So in this one here, and again, I'm very sorry if you can't see the words clearly, but if you listen, I will say the words you need to know. If I make this any bigger, well, I won't be able to put other things on the page. So first of all, we have 1995 and the present. I can't remember the name of this village. I believe it's Newberry, but I'm not sure. Let's say Newberry Village or Newberry Town. So people might say, well, there's lots of things. They've added some houses, they've added a road, they've added a car park, the fish market has changed to apartments, the fishing port has been removed, the shops have been changed to a restaurant, the farmland has been changed to a golf course, and the forest park has been changed to tennis courts. And if you only do all of those things, you're going to get maybe a 5.5, something like that, because you're not reporting main features. So main features, sometimes they're really, really difficult to see. But I think this one, if you pay attention and if you're clever enough, and really, if you're going to study in a foreign university, you should be able to notice that you have farm, fish, fishing, golf, and tennis, restaurants, cafe. So you can see that the town's very different. Farming and fishing is about what? That's right, it's about food, getting food. I would use the word agriculture. So here, this is an agricultural area, all about providing food for people. Whereas now we have golf, we have tennis, we have some nice apartments by the sea, we have some restaurants. It's much more of a leisure town. People go here to enjoy themselves. So that's a very clear change if you look at those changes. So don't just look at every individual change, look at them together and think, can you see some kind of pattern occurring there? And in that situation, it becomes pretty easy. Your main feature paragraph would basically be saying, this town has changed from this kind of town to this kind of town. This can be seen from this changing to this and this changing to this. And that would be like maybe one big BP1. The first sentence just saying the general change from agricultural to leisure. Second sentence saying, how do we know that? The fact that it's gone from farmland to a golf course, from a forest park to tennis courts, and they've removed the fishing port and fish market to be replaced by apartments. Then your second BP will probably just cover all of the other things that have changed and have stayed the same. That's important. What things have stayed the same? Most of the housing is the same, but they have added a few houses and made an extra road heading to the west. Again, north, south, east, west. Most maps are pretty much north at the top, so that doesn't change very much. And of course, the hotel and cafe are still there, but they've added a car park. Now, if you've covered all of those things, you're going to get a very good score for your TA because there's nothing else to write about. You've covered everything in there. So sometimes the map is not always obvious, and sometimes it's really not obvious. So this picture is nice and clear, but we don't have the question. The question is saying that A, B, and C are the locations for a future hypermarket. A hypermarket is just a really big supermarket. So in this situation, the number one mistake people make is recommending oh, I think the hypermarket should be in A because it's in the middle of the town and it will be easier for people to get there. Now, we can't do that because that's your opinion. And you're giving your opinion without full information. Now, if the data tells you something very clearly, this is a fact, you can write that down. It's not an opinion, it's a conclusion. But we have a lot of information this doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us how much rent do you pay? How much does it cost to have a building here? Is it easy to build a car park in the middle of a city? In B, it would be easy to have a much larger car park, probably, but we don't know that. So all we can do is report on the A, B, and C's differences between each other. Now, again, if I was going to do this, I would probably report my main feature paragraph as the idea that I'm just describing the town, and the town may be in relation to Hampford. So it's not really a proper main feature because when we're just pointing out what are the obvious features of this town as opposed to trends and patterns. So I would talk about the fact that Pellington, this town, Pellington is looking for a new hypermarket. Now, Pellington is a city with 120,000 people, 15 kilometers away from a much smaller Hampford that only has 30,000 people. Within Pellington, there is a main residential area as well as some industrial and countryside surrounding it. There are two main transport forms and an airport, road, rail, and airport access to the town. So I'm pretty much just pointing out some of the key features. Then my next paragraph, the BP2, body paragraph 2, would be describing the differences. So A is the only one in the residential area, while B and C are in the countryside. A and C are both near the railway, but B is closest to the motorway. Things like that. So again, I've never seen a map like this before. This is 10 years old, this map, so I'm not sure you'll ever see a map like this. I think this is too challenging for most people. But if you ever do see a map like that, there's just one map and doesn't really have another map to compare to, and it has locations within that map. This is the kind of thing you need to do. Okay, moving on now to another kind of question is the flow chart. Now, a flow chart is, the word flow, if you don't know, is like water. When water flows down the river or down the hill. Okay, so it says first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Now here we have 4 flow charts. Now this one is showing it going from here to here to here to here to here for making cement. Whereas this is actually a very simple flow chart. More of a diagram really, but a flow chart is just one kind of diagram. We have the process for making bricks. We have the life cycle. A life cycle is when it usually comes around in a circle back to the beginning. And then this one's quite complicated. We have the information comes from here. That information makes these reports. All of those reports are prepared on the computer and broadcast to people using these methods. Okay, so a flow chart, again, a lot of people think, what am I reporting when I do a flow chart? What are the main features? I mean, it just goes from here to here to here to here. I can write that. That's easy. Most of you are very good at writing that. So what are the main features? Generally, it will fall within one of these. You could just talk about the number of steps. So for this one, I would say that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main steps. The crushing, the mixing, the heating, the grinding, and the bagging, putting in bags. That's 5 steps. However, this is a lot more complicated than concrete production, which simply has 2 steps. Put the ingredients into the mixer and mix them. And so that would be your kind of main features there. Other ones will change. So you might have the time, the size, the cost. So it might have some of them might have for example, the size here means the percentage of ingredients or the amount of the ingredients, or actually not ingredients. Ingredients is for cooking. This would be materials. Sometimes it might be locations. Often a life cycle of an animal will have different locations there. So your main feature paragraph would normally start with something like Before we analyze this process in detail, or before I describe the life of a salmon, we can see that. So you're just saying, well, in my next paragraph, I will look at that process step by step. This paragraph, I'm looking for some main features. So again, I just use that expression. Before we look at this process in detail, we can see that cement production has 5 main steps, which is much more, but only 2 ingredients, while concrete production has 4 ingredients, but only 2 steps. Something like that. It's actually pretty easy to do. Okay, so hold on a second. Let me move on and